So good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's LGFA webinar. This is Bouncing Back and Building Resilience. Tonight is going to be super. I'm Claire Dowdle and I am the National Referee and Player Development Officer with Ladies Football here in Croke Park. And I have my colleague, Kieran Murda, on with me tonight.
Good evening, folks. How's all keeping?
We'll have the job of looking after the chat and the Q&A questions. We're delighted to have with us tonight Lynette McShane. Some people might know her as Hughes, and it's Dr. Lynette actually. So Lynette has a really great experience both in this area of building resilience and both within ladies Gaelic football. So Lynette actually played with Tyrone for 16 years and she won an All-Star throughout that time, and she captained Tyrone to an Ulster senior title. She's played football in ladies football with her beloved Carrickmore. I think that's why she has the picture there, for 20 years plus, and she was extremely successful, winning 12 senior club championships and 3 Ulster titles. She also has huge amount of honours within college football, winning many All-Irelands and titles, anything she can. And in her academic life, she has a degree in sports and then a master's in media, and then she went and did a doctorate and has done a lot of research on burnout within the GAA. Since that, she has went on to become the head of research in the Northern Ireland Association of Mental Health charity for 6.5 years. In that time, she undertook a 3-year research study into suicide in Northern Ireland. She's started her own charity called Another Pair of Hands and spent 15 years volunteering in Central America and Africa. And she now works as a consultant in mental health research and she's self-employed. So she has vast knowledge, and I definitely think all things bouncing back and building resilience. And we really welcome her this evening. I know it's going to be a great evening. And Lynette, it's over to you.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks a million. Good evening, folks. So today we're going to look at resilience and that element of trying to bounce back. And there's many of us, we're going to be bouncing back from different things. Maybe some of us are coming from bouncing back maybe with a job, back into education, bouncing back into our sport. And there's lots of things, maybe bouncing back from injury from last year. So each of us are coming from a different perspective and a different journey over the last year. Love on top of that, also the lockdown. And there's a lot that we have to try and bounce back from and to really build. I've purposely chosen this picture, not because we were the lucky ones on the winning side, but you know, resilience is a bit like this. And this is where sport is a brilliant analogy for resilience, because you've got the complete joy of winning contrasted with the flip of the coin, the just shattering defeat. And that's life in a nutshell. The moments in life that we're going to all have, there's amazing joy, but there's also going to be those shattering, heart-wrenching moments that we have to try and pick ourselves up from. And so life has those two sides of the coin. In between, we might have very peaceful times, but it's really about building that ability to see the tough times with new eyes and to also look with hope for the better days to come. Okay, so we'll get cracking. The aims of tonight, first of all, what is resilience? You know, we can throw this around and we don't really reflect on it, and there's a lot of words that are bandied around, and so we're just going to look at what that is. We're going to look at what are the protective factors and risk factors, and in knowing the protective factors, we can then set about educating ourselves, informing ourselves and preparing. And also when we look at the risk factors, we can look at our own life and say, well, hang on a wee second here, this is where I'm vulnerable, these are the things that were out of my control, these are the things that are in my control. The third thing, what are the things that affect mental health at your age, especially for our younger players, that adolescent age? If you're a coach, maybe to raise your awareness of the types of things that do happen within that age group. Equally, if you're a player, to realise, well, there are different negative sides to sport, to education, to relationships, to family, and how do I best prepare myself to come through those? We look at the specific setting of this year and the impact of lockdown, and it's a good opportunity for us to really sit back and say, well, hang on a wee second here, what's changed? What has been my experience? And how can I transform that which has been a challenge into something positive? And how can I take what is positive and really help that grow even more? We look then at what is inside our own control, and it's important to realise that, you know, none of us are just an empty vacuum. We have choices we have the potential to take charge of the steering wheel, so to speak, and to change things and to make things new. We look then also at the coping techniques for both on and off the field. And the reality is that our stressors in life, our challenges in life, the negative things that happen in life have a spillover effect. So if that negative thing has happened in sport, it has a spillover effect into our work or our studying and vice versa. So it's really about being aware of that and seeing what we can do with that. Okay, so who am I? I'm a researcher. So it's not my opinion that I'm going to put forward. I will share some experience as well, because I think that helps, you know, when we are honest with our own dialogue, it allows other people to be honest as well and to say, well, hang on a second, a lot of us have already experienced negative things in our lives. What have we learned from it? How can I help someone else who might actually encounter the same experience? How can I reach out for someone, and how can I give them that sense of hope that actually something that in the face of it seems really bad might not actually be that bad after all? So really looking at, well, what is resilience? Resilience is a word that is used a lot within the mental health and wellbeing world, and also for young people building confidence. I have put a little slide here, and it says, life is tough, but so are you. And resilience is about being aware that, yeah, life is tough. We're all going to suffer at different times. I would love to be able to say as a researcher that there's a magic recipe that you will avoid suffering. And that's just not life. So the quicker that we adjust to our expectations of life, it will help us to be really appreciative of the good times when there aren't any real stressors. But equally, it will help us to really focus on the tough times and how we meet them. And it's not the actual challenge, but it's how we respond. And a lot of us already know that from sport. It's not about what the opposition does, it's about how we respond to that. So sport is already helping us in terms of building resilience. Resilience as a definition is the capacity to face, overcome, and be strengthened by adversities in life. And some of the most amazing people that I've ever came across have had the toughest lives. You know, they haven't had it easy. So they have actually learned to overcome and be strengthened by the real challenges that they've met in life. Secondly, it's the capacity to prevent, minimize, or overcome the negative effects of adversity. And so many things that we can prevent. There are so many ways that we can take control and say, well, there's ways that there's things that I'm not going to do. There's risks that I'm not going to take. There's things that I'm going to use and I'm going to learn from them. So we have the potential to make really good choices that will either build us up or take us down, that will maybe lead us into wrong places with the wrong people, or that will lead us into the right places with the right people. Thirdly, it's the ability to cope with life's adversities. So when we know that things are going to be tough, you know, in football or in sport, we know that we're going to miss. We know that we're going to lose. We don't delude ourselves to think that, you know, for the rest of our lives, we're only ever going to go out on a pitch and win. And it's the same thing with life. We are going to fail. We are going to be challenged. And one of the examples of someone who really used that and applied that well was Michael Jordan, the basketball player. And he was able to reflect to say 3,000 times in his playing career, he was asked to take the winning shot that he missed, but he still took it. So it was not allowing the ones that he didn't succeed at to dictate and to make him afraid of trying again. And that is the ability to bounce back, the ability to say, well, hang on, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? How can I change that? And so we're talking about reinforcing within our mind and within our psyche that, yeah, tough things are going to happen, but we can bounce back. Human beings are very strong and you are very tough. If we look at the protective factors in terms of resilience, these are the key things that we need to work on and we can work on, okay? So communication and social skills are imperative. So many times when things happen wrong, and we'll see this on the football field as well, when maybe you go 6 or 7 points down, what happens? Silence. People go silent. And we lose communication skills. We lose and we shut down that door that could help get us back on the winning track. If only we said an encouraging word, if only we reached out and shouted at something positive at another player who was maybe having a bad day. And so the communication and social skills that we know that work on the football field are so important across the board in life. And it's about developing the ability to communicate maybe when you don't necessarily want to, and to also being vulnerable, because a lot of the times if we're trying to communicate maybe when we're struggling, we also have to be vulnerable And we have to be aware that maybe sometimes we'll get it right and we'll say it to the right person and they will help us. And sometimes we get it wrong and the person doesn't know what to do with it. So our social skills are very important in protecting us, because if we have a good social circle around us, it will leave it a whole lot easier for us to talk about the things that are really important. Self-esteem and self-confidence is another protective factor. Again, I would love to be able to say that, you know, it's a matter of going on Google or Amazon, get DHL, and they will arrive at your door with a box of self-esteem and self-confidence for life. But that's not how it works, okay? And so self-esteem and self-confidence is really being honest with yourself and looking at, well, what are the good things about me? What are the things that, you know, make me unique? What are the ways that I've invested in my skills that can build me up? But equally to say, well, where are my weaknesses and how can I work on those weaknesses? And it's actually overcoming some of those weaknesses that will really build our own self-esteem and our confidence. Third protective factor is personal control, to realize that there are things that we can take control of. Equally, there are things that we can't control. And so a healthy psychology is focusing on the controllables. So I can't control someone else. I can't control what someone else does, but I can control if I want to spend time with that person, if I want to hang around socially with them. I can control my role in that social setting. Decision making and goals, then, you know, we as human beings, we deal well with goals, setting ourselves goals of what we want to do and to keep that focus. Otherwise, we can end up floating. And when we end up floating, we end up in the wrong company, in the wrong places, with the wrong people, and we end up then in places that actually can damage us. So it's about us knowing that the decisions we make have ripple effects. And so we cast a stone with that decision, and where do the ripples go? And so tonight it's about looking at those ripples and to say, well, hang on a second, maybe until now I've been making really poor decisions. It could be I'm in a drinking circle and I'm just hanging around with the wrong company and it's doing nothing for me and it's leaving me lethargic and it's making me maybe not want to play football. And equally, it makes us maybe lose sight of our goals. What was the goal? And so when I think of goals, I think of if somebody said to you in life that you couldn't fail, what would you strive to do? And that was the way I went about football. You know, I thought, well, if somebody said I couldn't fail, what would I want? I would want to win All Ireland and want to get an All-Star. I didn't win an All Ireland senior with Tyrone ladies. I won All Irelands with college and things like that. It wasn't my goal, but having that goal made me continually work to better myself. And yeah, we failed. But now when I stopped playing, do I regret trying to reach for the highest height? No. And then our coping behaviours. So a lot of the time we have learned our coping behaviours from our parents and those whom we live with. Some people avoid problems. They'd like to bury the head under the sand and hope things go away. And some people respond maybe angry. Some people do avoidance behaviours. And so it's about understanding as well, how have I been conditioned through my social circumstances, and what's good about that and maybe what's bad? Okay, so maybe if my father was an avoidance techniquer, how did that work out? And if it didn't work out for him, then I need to change that because it's not going to work out for me. So it's very important that we look at where we've come from, what we've learned, and what we've learned by being in that environment, but equally reaffirming to ourselves that that can be changed. All things can be changed. So we can actually develop very positive coping behaviours. External support systems are vital, and this is where the GA is second to none. You know, when things are maybe going wrong at school or things aren't great at home, having external support systems, and it could be just somebody who knows you, it could be a coach, it could be a football player, it could be a manager, but just knowing that somebody else has your back is very important. And if you don't have those external support systems, then you're going to be more vulnerable because you will end up trying to solve life's problems on your own. And 9 times out of 10, that doesn't do well for us. Empathy is another thing, you know, to not only be empathetic to other people and how they behave, but also empathetic to ourselves, to be okay with making mistakes, to be okay with our failures, and to not be hard on ourselves and to have this negative cycle to say, oh, it's always me, I always mess up, you know, I can never do things right, and we feel that. And so part of our empathy is also needed towards ourselves to say, hang on a second, I'm only human, I'm only learning, I'm going to mess up. Messing up's not the problem, it's what we do with the mess. Do we clean it up or do we make it messier? Okay. And then autonomy, really looking at, you know, me making decisions that I can stand over. Okay. So many times I've worked with people in mental health services who had very traumatic horrendous experiences, and they said to you, I had a gut feeling that I shouldn't have went. Something was telling me something was going to go wrong, and they didn't make an autonomous decision. They didn't honor that and say, hang on a wee second, not for me. And that's very difficult. And we live in a society where saying no is very, very difficult. And especially as a young teenager or in a group, in a team, it's very hard to say no. But by saying no, you actually show that you're very courageous, and that actually it's so much easier to go with the flow and join everyone else. It's a whole lot harder to make a decision that you're going to stand over. But that no could save you from some of the most traumatic, horrendous experiences in your life. So it's about honouring that. And then connectedness with our family members is another protective factor. You know, our families aren't perfect. Our families a lot of the time can be actually the source of a lot of our problems. So what is our connectedness like with our families? If our family connectedness is good, that's great. You know, stick with that. If our connectedness with our family members isn't great, there's relationships then that we need to really work on, and we have to try and see things maybe from other people's eyes, but equally then we need to cast the net wider for external support if our families aren't that place where we can get that. The risk factors then in terms of not being resilient are low self-esteem. You know, it's about valuing yourself as an individual, valuing yourself as a unique person, not comparing yourself to others. We live in a world that's dictated by and large by our phones, the images we see, the perfect lifestyles that we perceive other people are living. And that fuels low self-esteem because we're sitting there thinking, well, it's not me. I don't have this great life, you know, per me. When in reality, you know, the faraway fields look green, but actually they're not a lot of the time. And so when you kind of feel that your self-esteem is low, that's a time to turn inwards on yourself and say, well, hang on a second, how can I build myself up? Because again, I would love to tell you that there's a professional that you will meet who will do that for you. But actually, most of the answers that we need, we do hold the key to them ourselves. Another risk factor is isolation and lack of significant others. And we're going to be bombarded over the next 6 months to maybe 2-3 years about the impact of the isolation of the lockdown, because we're made to be social, we're made to talk to other people, to be in physical contact, to hug, to touch. All of that has been eroded. And so if you're struggling with the lockdown and you're struggling with that isolation, that's just a sign that you're human. We're not meant to be in isolation. We're not meant to be cut off from the people we love. We're not meant to not hug and to touch and to be with other people. So it's about what can we do with this in the temporary sense? How much can we be in connection? And it's about not giving in that this is going to go on forever. It's about how we can be with the right people and good people that will help us. A big risk factor is family breakdown. You know, across the world literature on resilience and also mental health, one of the biggest shocks and the biggest rock to your life as a young person is if you have family breakdown. If your parents have separated, if they've divorced, maybe you don't know a parent, maybe you have a very volatile relationship with your parents. Family breakdown is going to really challenge you in terms of your self-esteem, your self-confidence, and trying to really understand the sense of the world. And so it's a difficult one to try to work our way through, but it can be worked through. Social deprivation is another thing. If we come from a poor area, and a lot of the time that social deprivation, there's more incidents and the more likelihood of you being introduced to drugs and alcohol. There's more likelihood for promiscuous sexual activity. And so it's important that we realise this. Social deprivation, we talk about in terms of poverty. I didn't grow up in a place that was deemed wealthy. We came from a socially deprived area. That does not have to make you. You do not have to be that identity. It doesn't have to be a label that you wear for life. So you can really look and say, well, this is where I'm at, but where would I like to go? What would I like to change in the future? And one of the key things about that is making good choices with drugs and alcohol and sexual activity and education. So drugs, you know, they're around us everywhere. We cannot make the drugs disappear. You can only make yourself strong enough to say no. That's it. Same thing with alcohol. You know, I've seen it so many times where young people come into a team and there's that pressure to maybe do the shots or drink yourself into oblivion. Again, we cannot get rid of the circumstances where alcohol is going to be there as a pressure, but you can build yourself up and get comfortable with saying no. And the more comfortable that you become with it, you will actually empower yourself and other people as well to not fall into that trap. And this is a big one in terms of us females. Across the psychological literature, girls, we do not deal well with sexual activity outside of love and committed relationships. Our bodies are designed to connect. And so that's something very important. Yes, we're living in a time where we can do whatever we want and you're free to do whatever you want. But what I ask you is to stop and say, is it good for you to do whatever you want? Because a lot of the time it isn't. Yeah, you can go out and you can drink the head of yourself. You can take drugs. You can have sex with people who you don't know. Is it good for you in terms of building your self-esteem? The same thing with education. You know, a lot of our experiences come from South America and India and Africa. And there are over 1 billion young women who will never get a chance to get educated. Such a golden opportunity to open doors and to really change so much of your life. And when we're out in the poor countries, one person can change a full family. So if your background isn't what you would like it to be, if there are challenges there, education is one of the surest, quickest ways that you can change that and open doors. Antisocial behaviour is something, well, in Northern Ireland this week, there's been plenty of it, unfortunately. But antisocial behaviour is something that can very quickly suck you in. It can give you a rush. It can give you an adrenaline kick, especially when you've been bored for so long. But again, is it good for you to do? And then obviously homelessness. So if you're don't have a stable home or a home to be in, and these risk factors lead to poor mental health outcomes. And when we talk about mental health outcomes, we talk about the ability to form and maintain relationships, and not just any relationships. Good relationships where people respect you, you respect them. They're not threatening, they're not bullying, they're not controlling. So really positive relationships with good people. The ability to make good decisions. So again, surrounding yourself by people who want to see the best in you, who believe in you, who want to see you make good decisions in life. The ability to pursue leisure activities. And one of the saddest things is that so many times when we get into tough areas in life, we give up the good things in our life. We give up the sport, or we give up the music, we give up the social life. We just kind of detach ourselves from all of the things that actually could really help us get through it. And that's why I would say to you, the minute the door opens, I know we've got the 12th of April for sport to take off now. The minute that door opens, go. Like, do not give up, even though you might be feeling lack of motivation, even though you might be questioning, oh, could I be bothered? The reason that you're saying I couldn't be bothered is because we've all got a little bit lethargic in our own space. And so the quickest way to challenge that is to get out and get at it. And the other thing that mental health and low resilience impacts is our ability to study and work. And one of the things that really helps with our ability to concentrate and our study and with time management is keeping sport going. And we're living in a very academic world where so many teachers will say to you, you know, give up your sport. This is an exam year. It's the most important year. Never give up your sport. It will make you a better time manager. It will help you mentally. The fresh oxygen will help you in so many ways. It will also help you to be a better time manager. Give up TV, give up social media, give up your phone, give up Netflix, but do not give up your sport. So the common risk factors as well that we have to be aware of in terms of the adolescent age group. So if you're a coach, maybe working with minors, or if you're a minor yourself, you know, so the living conditions, your family again is key. And unfortunately that's out of our control. So you might have had maybe negative experiences within your family. In particular, if you've had a parent that had a mental illness, that will leave you more vulnerable. You know, my mother had severe postnatal depression when we were born. I was aware of that. I don't have to live in the fear of it. I have 7 children now myself. But straight away, it was important that when I was expecting my first child, I had to be aware there's a vulnerability here, because that had happened in our family. So if there's a vulnerability, I need to prepare now. What am I going to do? So if I feel a dip, who am I going to talk to? How am I going to experience it? How am I going to share it? How am I going to be honest? How am I not going to try and beat this on my own? And then the other negative experiences in terms of early childhood, bullying, abuse, beating, and like these things, you know, there's so many anti-bully policies and all of the rest, but a lot of it is just words. I went through 2 years at school and 2 more years at college, severely bullied. And there is nothing more devastating. You know, I've been that person who is sat in a ditch and not wanted to live anymore. That's where bullying can take you. And it takes a long time to process that actually you're not the problem. The bully has a lot of insecurities, and maybe your only problem is that you're trying to get on, and that you're happy in what you're doing, maybe that your family is a bit more secure than the other person's. So it's about us seeing it from different eyes. And so now, years later, the people who bullied me, I have no problem with meeting them. In fact, I would see it as one of the best experiences, because it taught me to stand on my own 2 feet. It taught me to continue playing football as a lifeline. It taught me that the bullying was a way of showing me who weren't good friends for me to be with. And yes, it was tough to stand on my own, but actually it's worse to go in the wrong direction with the wrong people. And the other circumstances that can happen are like the likes of substance abuse and pregnancy, malnutrition, parental loss is a massive thing if maybe you've lost a parent, or if you don't feel connected with the school community, especially if you're under 16. So these are our early childhood experiences that can actually lead to poor mental health outcomes. Others then, when you go further up into the childhood, in between kind of your P7 and your 3rd year, or the adverse learning environment, or if you have difficulties at school, this can be a real hurdle to overcome. And again, it's very difficult when we're in a very academic system that only sees stars as a worth, or only sees points as a way to open doors. And you're so much more than the stars, you're so much more than the points. So even if this is an exam year and you're feeling the pressure, don't lose sight that there are many ways to end up with the same destination. I never got stars on any piece of paper. I might have got an all-star for football, but I never got a star on a piece of paper for an exam. It didn't hold me back, okay? And so it's important that we take that balance that, yeah, you're going to have these pupils who are going to have straight A stars, top students. They're not going to have any difficulties in school. If that's not who you are, that's totally fine. There are different ways and there are different avenues for you to reach the destination that you need to get to. Another factor is key is substance abuse within the family. And unfortunately, if you have been encountered substance abuse in your family, you are more likely to have downloaded that as a coping technique for when things go wrong for you. So you're more likely to become an alcoholic yourself. That again is not a reason to be afraid. That again is a reason to say, well, hang on a second. If my mother and father used that, how can I not use that? What other ways can I actually change this? And if you've had a chaotic family life, that doesn't make it very good for you in terms of learning and trying to process things well. Equally, there's trauma or maltreatment, poor nutrition, poor self-esteem. Unfortunately, some of our parents are a bit broken themselves. And so if you've lived in an environment maybe where you've been told that you're useless, or you've been told that you're the problem, or that you've been just felt that you're in the way, it's not necessarily that. It's just that at that moment in time, your parents are maybe not in a good place themselves. When I look back on our own family life, there were different times that I didn't see it from the perspective of my parents. And I internalized it maybe as a problem that I had. But equally, it wasn't that. So there are different challenges that come in life, and people try to make them the best way that they know how. And then adolescence, this is the key area. This is where you're going to be bombarded with messaging. You're going to have the negative impact of the media, and you're going to have peer pressure from your friends. There's going to be a lot of introduction to things that could lead you very quickly down in life. One quick way, when we were younger, it was just magazines. We didn't have the kind of social media thing. And it was very clear that looking at images of other people that have been filtered and all of the rest, and a lot of the research is saying this across Ireland and the UK, that the more you engage with social media, the lower your self-esteem and self-confidence. So what do? Learn to turn it off. Give yourself headspace. You cannot think for yourself when there's dings going on and there are people contacting you. So take yourself off to a quiet space and just get used to your own company and to switch it off. It's actually very healthy to do that. The other thing that has a massive impact in terms of our adolescence is the death of a significant figure in our lives, such as a grandparent or a family member. And that is key. Grief is very difficult, and especially maybe over the last year, if you've lost someone in your family to COVID or to cancer or to heart disease, to any other form of illness, grief is massive, and we have to be very gentle on ourselves with grief. The reason that we struggle so much with death, is because the person that we've lost was really loved. If that person hadn't been significant in your life, then you wouldn't grieve as much. So to be patient with the grief, and to also challenge yourself in that grief to do things. Our natural instinct is I don't want to do anything. I'm just so overcome, to challenge yourself to do more. And this is why the ladies Gaelic football is so important in terms of resilience and in terms of positive mental health outcomes. You know, straight away, socially you're connected. There is nothing or nowhere that I have found in life where you can just turn up 3 or 4 times a week to a group of 28, 29 others. There might be 4 or 5 other teams. You're constantly meeting other people who have shared life experiences and who can help you. You're building your social and your communication skills. You're part of something bigger than yourself. And the thing is, when we experience difficult things in life, we can turn on ourselves and forget that actually we're part of something way more. And so it's important to be part of that community. It's important to be a part of that team. In particular, you know, if you look at the ethos of the GAA, you have good people volunteering their time to help make you be a better person. They're not there to take you down. They're there to try and challenge you to be more than you would want to try to challenge yourself to be. And it's important that we also bear in mind that you don't have to be friends or like each other, you know, but that you have to work together to achieve goals. And this helps us in school and in relationships, and helps us with work on further down the line. That, yeah, we will have to work with other people who are very different to us, but although we can still achieve special things with those people, we don't have to be best buddies. But you'll never know down the line when we will maybe cross over again and help each other. And there's an old adage in Tyrone anyway, and they say, tell me your company and I'll tell you what you are. You have an opportunity to surround yourself with great people who are there to try and build you up. And so don't miss that opportunity. For me, it was life-changing. It was just life-changing to not be stuck in my own problems too much and to be able to just go straight out the door and to have the crack and have a laugh. Your self-esteem and self-confidence, you know, self-esteem and self-confidence is built through the skills by challenging yourself to learn new things, challenge yourself in your fitness, challenge yourself socially. So that all is naturally built through the skills of your game, by setting yourself goals, by having a good work ethic, by committing to something and sticking to it. That builds a brilliant belief in yourself that if you can do that in other areas in your life. It keeps you away from antisocial behaviour, you know, like risk-taking sexually or drugs or alcohol, and it flows across into other life areas. It really helps you in other life areas, because on a football field, you're constantly problem solving. It unfolds right before you. In relationships, you have to problem solve. In families, you have to problem solve. In work, you have to problem solve. And the same thing with education. So what you're learning in football can be applied right across the border. So it's brilliant skills. The escapism then is another factor. When life is getting tough, and it will, there's a brilliant ability to escape, and no better way than to play. You know, it's why I played so long. I just didn't want to grow up. I just wanted to continually play for as long as possible. And there's something very important about that, that you can escape family life for that hour or two, that you forget your problems. You can forget about bullying. You can forget your mental health issues. You can forget the school pressures, the stress or relationships, whatever's going on. You get a chance to play. You get a chance to physically invest in yourself, and you also get a chance to have fun. And so much of that is important. Fun is key. In all things in life, if we can have a laugh, if we can not take ourselves too seriously, and if we can have fun with good people, life is so much sweeter. And it's important to realise that even within that team dynamic, yeah, you can escape other life problems, and there will be challenges within the team dynamic. So even being isolated within the team, you know, and that was my experience within my own club. I went to a different secondary school to all of the rest of my team members. I wasn't asked on the social nights out. I wasn't asked on the wee days away. I was very much part of the team, but I was very much an individual as well. And it made me think a lot more, and it took time for me to realise why I was left out. But in the same token, it also helped me to stick with it when I felt, oh, maybe I don't want to go, or maybe I'm not part of it, okay? And when we stick with something, it means that we're building ourselves up for our own self. We're not seeking the external validation of somebody else to say, oh, you're great or you're wonderful. You're going to learn that and explore that yourself by taking the game by the scruff of the neck. And it's the same thing with life. We have to take life by the scruff of the neck, whatever it throws at us. And not only that, it builds mental toughness, okay? So our mental toughness, within sport, we learn to cope with winning and losing. Same thing with life. You know, we lose friends, we gain friends. We lose loved ones, we gain more loved ones. You start the game, sometimes you make the team, other times you're dropped. Same thing in life. Sometimes you pass the test, other times you fail. Sometimes you make mistakes, other times you don't. And so it's building us up to realise that there is that mix of good days and bad days. Equally, there's hard words that are said. within the 4 white lines. And it's tough. You know, I was called all the names under the sun by managers. There was plenty of dodgy words used. And within that football, we can box it. We can say, well, hang on a second here. Let's try not to personalize it. And one of the biggest problems we have as females is that we tend to personalize things. It's because they don't like me. It's because I'm a failure. It's because I'm unlikable. It's because I'm unlovable. Actually, 90% of the time, that's false. So it's about taking criticism and saying, hang on a wee second here. The only reason they're annoyed or frustrated is because they know that I can do better. So how am I going to do better? Okay. And so it's the same thing with our life. We can challenge ourselves to do better. Even when somebody corrects us, and there's nothing nice about being corrected, but even when someone corrects us, to say, okay, hang on a second, why are they saying that? What have I got to learn about myself? And all of us have lots to learn in that way. Okay. As I said, it's important that we look at our own background, where we come from. Some of us could be very lucky. We're starting life in the Jaguar, okay? And what I mean by that is your parents are together and they're committed. You come maybe from a very financially secure background. There's no addiction problems in your family. You go to a good school and you have a good ability to learn. You don't struggle. You have a good support network with your family and community. You have a secure family life, safe environment, no parental mental health problems. You've got the Jaguar. There's very few of us come into life in the Jaguar, okay? We might look at other people and we think, oh, they're so lucky, like look at their life. But actually, the majority of us don't come into life with the Jaguar. Equally, even if someone has all that, the Jaguar can and still will break down at some point. So we'll need serviced. And so that's where you need a toolbox. And that's where resilience comes. You need a toolbox to say, okay, if something breaks down, how am I going to manage this? For a lot of the rest of us, we start life in the scrap car, okay? And so maybe there's parental breakdown, or you don't know one of your parents, or you've lost one. You know, you're maybe isolated within your community with a lack of support networks. Maybe there's been addiction or drug and alcohol problems in your family. Maybe your family is financially insecure, especially in the current times, maybe not knowing what the future holds if parents have maybe lost jobs. Maybe you're living in a deprived area with a lot of antisocial behaviour going on and a lot of peer pressure to get involved in a lot of things. And it's important to not see yourself as a scrap car. You know, it might not be a Jaguar, but it can still drive well when it's fixed up. And you can avoid a lot of those circumstances that will lead it to be scrapped. Again, you need a toolbox. You might need more tools, but that toolbox can still end up bringing you on the journey of the life that you wish for yourself. So we talk about bouncing back from lockdown as well. You know, it's been a very weird year for everyone. There's a lot of, you know, we're all in this together. Actually, we weren't. It's very different. Some people, nothing changed in terms of their work. Other people were grounded completely, you know, not sure what the future holds. Other people were furloughed. Some schools were closed, some weren't. And it's been all very changeable. So we need to look, and I like a change map. It's just a very simple way. And this is something that you can do yourself at the end of this. Just put your name in the middle and say, right, family, what's changed? You know, what's changed? Let's be honest here. Maybe your family hasn't been great. You know, for some of you, maybe family has been a wonderful experience, especially maybe if you were avoiding bullying in school beforehand and suddenly you got away from that. Again, it's going to be very different for each of us, but it's important that we take this time before we go back into our football and go back into school and everything else to say, well, hang on a second here, what's changed for me in the last year? Our school and our community, you know, maybe we've been totally isolated within our school and community. Maybe your school has actually been brilliant, and maybe your teachers have been great. Who has reached out to help you? And the same thing with our community. Who or what have you missed? And it's important that if you've missed them and they have been a positive impact on your life until they were stopped, get back in contact with those people. Get back in contact with the team, with the girls, the managers, whoever it was there. Sport and hobbies have obviously had a massive jolt this year. We've lost an awful lot. And very quickly, you know, we're creatures of habit. So we get into the habit of training and we keep it going. Equally, we might have fallen out of the habit now and we think, oh, I don't know if it could be bothered. Maybe we've put on weight. Maybe we're afraid to challenge ourselves physically. You know, maybe we're just thinking, oh, well, sure, who knows what's going to happen. Get back at the hobbies and the sport. Get back. It will be the quickest and surest way for you to return some sense of normality. And equally, the fear in the media to honestly look at that. Have you downloaded the fear narrative? Have you watched and absorbed so much of it that maybe you're afraid to go back? And how much of it is real or how much of it is perceived? So if you're a young player under 18, you have about 100% chance of survival from COVID. So it's important that we look at that and have perspective to say, okay, so how much fear have I got on me now, and where does that fear lie, and what am I going to do with that fear? How can I challenge it? Okay, and that might mean switching off the TV. That might mean switching off all social media, but that it can be done. And it's important that we try to rationalize the fear. Is the fear that has been projected in the last year, how did that work out? Has it been as bad as we thought? And if it hasn't, then take the fear from a red to an orange, okay? And it might take you a few weeks to get back into the swing of things, even a few months, especially if you've got very anxious and you might need to challenge a lot of that anxiety or fear. But that can be done, okay? And so when we start introducing the small bits of our life again, we will challenge a lot of that fear, and a lot of it will disappear because it has been situation specific this year. So it's important from a resilience perspective and a mental health perspective to look at what we can control, okay? So we don't just surrender and say, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. We can't control other people, but we can control ourselves, okay? We can't control what happens, but we can control how we react to what happens, okay? And so a simple thing like that, I couldn't control anything to do with COVID or the pandemic, but I could control how I reacted. I switched off the TV last April. I've been living very peaceful from it because I wasn't downloading that fear every day. We can't stop life being tough at times, but we can make ourselves better able to cope. And what's very important in resilience is finding meaning in it. That if we can look at something very tough and say, well, hang on a second, what have I learned? What have I achieved? What have I done really well? How have I coped well with it? And how can I transform this to say, well, actually, it wasn't as bad as I thought. We can't do very much about other people's choices, but we can make good ones ourselves. And a lot of the time that just takes the courage to say no to the things that you don't want to do or that you shouldn't be doing. No is a hard word to say in our world that is yes all around us, but it's a very important one in terms of making sure that we are in a safe environment and we're doing things that are right. You can learn about why we are the way we are. So as I say, about our own background, what we take to the table, and then we can learn to control our feelings, our emotions, and our behaviours. We're living in a world where feelings trump everything. So if I feel that somebody has done something to me, well, then it's real. And actually, it's not. So we have to learn, well, how do I feel? How is my emotions about it? It's making me angry or sad. Is it real? Is that really what they meant? Is that really the experience that I'm having? And then how do we then control our behaviours? And you can learn coping techniques and change for the better. Every one of us can change for the better. They always say, like, every saint had a past, every sinner has a future. No matter where you are in life at the minute, no matter what you've done wrong to date, we can all learn to change. It's important as well as an adolescent to spot the changes in ourselves. A lot of the time when we're younger, we don't have the words, okay? So if I'm anxious or stressed or depressed as a young person, a lot of the time that'll show more in my body than it will in what I say. So maybe they're more physical, maybe you're more irritable or you're lethargic, you've no energy, maybe you're acting out. It could be self-harm, it could be negative self-talk. Maybe you're feeling isolated, afraid of talking, to your family or your friends, that you're closing down because you don't really have the words to say. Maybe you find it hard to describe what you don't actually understand yourself. And so it's important that when we don't have the words, that a lot of the time it can physically show out. So an example of that, my husband took unwell last year. Our eldest child developed a lot of stress and anxiety because his daddy almost died. It shows in his body through psoriasis. It doesn't show in him saying, Mommy, I'm stressed because daddy nearly died. But he had a lot of nervousness in his stomach. He had problems with his digestion. He had skin problems. And this is what I talk about in terms of the physical symptoms, okay? And important, again, if you're a coach, to be maybe thinking of that. If someone's at training and suddenly they're feeling nauseous or they're feeling sick all the time, it might not be anything to do with their stomach, but it could be stress. It could be anxiety. It could be something else that's going on at home or bullying. So it's important that we are aware of that. And a lot of the time when you're younger, you don't know who to turn to. Because it takes a lot of trust to open up about the deepest, darkest side of ourselves. I know I didn't open up when I was getting bullied. I learned to pray a lot but I didn't feel that I had somebody that I could open up to, even though I had a good relationship with my family and my brothers, but I didn't know how to even say it. So it's important that we become aware of that. And if you can't say something, you can write it, you can record it, you can do it in a way that you can actually share that experience or share your story with somebody without being face to face. And so it's important as well as coaches and ourselves, girls, that we recognise that girls are more likely to engage in deliberate self-harm, okay? And so harming behaviours involve pulling at your hair, pulling your hair out, self-harming through cutting or bruising. And a lot of these things will have come to the surface in the lockdown because we couldn't control what was going on around us. So what do? In a weird way, we try to take control, but actually we're out of control. So when we're pulling at our hair, or maybe we've developed an eating disorder, and maybe we've got anxiety and panic attacks, and this is all our way that our body and our mind is telling us we're not dealing very well with what's happened here. Okay, so it's important that we become aware of that. And again, if you are self-harming, that you share that with someone, and to say to them, I don't know what to do with this. And over the lockdown, I've had 5 or 6 sets of parents who have came to me to say, look, my young girl dealing with anxiety or dealing with an eating disorder, feeling very suicidal, and to have that conversation. And I've been able to go and have that conversation and let them see, this has been a very unusual year. Go easy on yourself, but this will all also take care of itself if we just have more patience in the time that we're in. And again, in terms of a coping technique, our brain is amazing. Everything, our 5 senses, our sight, our hearing, our smell, our taste, our touch, that's how we read the world around us, okay? And so our brain is just an amazing computer, and it's trying to process everything that's going around us. Some of us are right brain oriented, other people are left brain. Right brain is that you're creative, that you've got good intuition, maybe you're musical or you're arty. It's important, if that's the person that you are, that you don't get stressed out too much with the academic, and that you always try to honour that creative side. The left-sided brain person is more likely going to take well through school. So analytical, logic, mathematics, science, written. So school is not going to maybe be a problem, but equally they need to have the balance between that creative. And it's important for us to realise that our brain has to process everything we see, we hear, we smell, we taste, and we touch. So the key things in life to control are what you listen to or you hear. One of the surest things that will happen if maybe you're depressed or anxious is that your music will also be pretty grim. Your clothes will also probably be grey or black. Okay, our body has an amazing way to mirror what's going on to the outside world without us even being aware of it. So it's important that if you're feeling anxious or stressed, start listening to really good things. And we've got brilliant resources like this one here is like Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. We've got audio CDs, we've got audio books that we can buy, that we can pump our brain full of really positive things. We can listen to really uplifting music. We can listen to positive people who've already maybe came through tough times. What you watch or see is very important as well. One of the experiences that I learned from the mental health world was most of the people who had come out of psychiatric inpatient care were watching very dark, eerie movies, series, shows, all murder, grim, and that was just fueling this negative, toxic environment and thought process in your head. So, go to animations, watch kids' movies, watch something light, watch something uplifting, and be very careful about what you choose to watch or see. And I know it's hard when you're living in a Netflix world where people are talking about this series and that series. I don't even have Netflix, but I don't, be very careful about what you watch, because your body can watch something and it can be quite traumatic, and you can actually experience the trauma simply from watching it. It's called vicarious trauma. What you eat is so important, what we put into our body. Our body is the greatest gift that we have, our greatest tool. And so what we eat, and a lot of us will have been really challenged to eat good in the lockdown. So this is a chance to say, right, okay, this is where I'm going to take the bull by the horns and challenge what I'm eating and really try to fuel my body. And lastly, who touches you and how. So important. We're made as human beings to be touched, but to be touched lovingly and to be touched with affection by people who love us and have our best interests at heart. So it's really important that we are mindful of that, and we choose relationships with significant others that are reflective of that. And we bring to the table here the cognitive model. So learning how something makes you think, feel and behave is key in life, okay? So every situation is different. So the situation is something that happens. A situation leads to a thought process, and that's how we interpret it. That leads to an emotion. How do I feel about what I'm seeing or what I'm hearing or what I'm experiencing? And that leads to behavior. So an example in the football world is a situation, you get a penalty. One person on the team freaks out and goes, oh my God, I don't want to go near this. I can't even watch. They think this is awful because it's too stressful. Their emotion is a fear. I will have to turn away, and they don't want to have anything to do with it. They're not taking the kick. Whereas someone else, the exact same situation, might say, deadly. I've waited all year for a penalty. I've been waiting on this moment. You think this is great. This is my chance to shine. The emotion is excitement to say, this is brilliant. I'm going to take it now and I'm going to score this. And the behavior is to grab the ball and step up and take it. Each one of us is going to react to the same situation differently. Another football example would be the likes of, say, a team. Situation is manager doesn't start in the team. You know, one of us could very quickly will think, well, hang on a second here. Why is that? You know, well, I did miss one session every week and that person that started hasn't. That might make us feel, well, okay, I'm a bit disappointed, but I can understand where he's coming from. And the behavior will be then, well, I'm going to go to all the sessions. I'm going to make it impossible for the manager to drop me. Someone else might take that situation and say straight away, oh, he's dropped me because he doesn't like me, or she's dropped me because she thinks I'm a bad person. She doesn't like what I say. She doesn't like what I do. That will make you think that there's a problem between you and the person. It'll make you feel very anxious or maybe depressed, thinking, oh, I'm the problem. And the behavior will more likely be, I'm not going back there. They don't like me and I'm not part of the team. Okay. So our thoughts and our feelings don't always reflect reality. And that's where communication comes in key, especially with our sport. You know, the quickest way to solve a problem is to take it to the person that you have the problem with. So if a manager drops you, to go and say, why was it dropped? Okay. And that might put coaches or managers under pressure, but that's okay. You know, I'm always of the opinion that you're better going and getting an answer rather than coming up with 20 crazy ones in your own head that might lead you to maybe giving up on the sport or to giving up on the team. Okay. So there's lots of different situations that will come. It's important that we don't allow how we think or how we feel to just make us check out of something that would be very stupid of us to leave. Okay. And in terms of our adolescence, you know, it is a very tricky age range. Like, you know, any of you girls who have been locked in the last year, you know, there's nobody your age could deal well with being disconnected from all of the social world that is so important to you. You know, you've been very understanding, you've been very well behaved. You know, maybe we didn't have mobile phones when we were minors, but we would have been jumping ditches, like we would have been hiding out in fields. I honestly don't think that we would have been as obedient. And so it's important that you realize that this is a challenging time in your life anyway. You don't know yourself. You're only getting to know yourself. And then suddenly, you know, you have to be aware of everything that has happened in your family life, everything that's happened with lockdown, everything that's going on in school, within football. And there's a lot of balls that are being juggled all at the one time. And this is a time in our lives when mental disorder is more likely to develop or to become apparent. Okay. Add that to the peer pressure where there's going to be smoking, there's going to be alcohol, there's going to be drug use, and you're going to be in a situation at some time in your life where that will be ongoing. And that's when you're going to have to say no. So you're going to also maybe be exposed to family unrest, or maybe there's going to be family disturbances with jobs and things like that. And that family unrest or maybe chaotic upbringing also leaves you more vulnerable to try to escape life. And one of the quickest ways to escape problems is to drink your head away or to take drugs. Okay. And as someone who has tried the John Smirnoff version of coping, it doesn't work. You end up waking up with the exact same problems plus a sore head and a very dodgy stomach. So that is not a good way to cope with problems. It might give you a temporary escape, but the problems are still there. And so it's important that we are aware that substance use is very damaging, especially to our brain and our body. There's a reason why legally it's illegal to take alcohol until you're 18, because a lot of our brain is still developing. When we take binges of alcohol, it actually causes cell destruction in our brain. And so our brain is amazing and it's to be protected. So it's very important that we realize what damages it. So drugs, automatic neurological deficits are caused by taking drugs. Equally, alcohol, by taking it in binges, is very damaging to our brain and also our development. To the point that in mental health services, if I was dealing with someone who at 14 was taking drugs, who is now 40, I have to treat that person as a 14-year-old because their emotional and psychological development has been stunted at 14 years of age. And so it's important that we realise that. And adolescents are automatically susceptible to peer pressure, okay? And especially the media influences, the reality TV, where all of this is seen as very glamorous and great, but we don't ever see the dark side, okay? And it's the same thing with the celebrities and all of that. They never tell you the dark days until they're out of it, okay? And so we can sometimes think that, you know, we're going to be fine, it's not going to affect us. Nobody takes their first drink thinking that they're going to be an alcoholic. Nobody takes their first roll up of cannabis or their first line of cocaine thinking that they're going to be an addict, okay? So it's very important that we make sensible choices. So what I encourage you to do is to make good choices now. Make really good choices in your relationships, like friends and boyfriends. You know, friends who build you up. As I say, having been bullied with and being surrounded by people who weren't good friends, an awful experience. So yes, it's hard to go alone, but actually it's better than to go with the wrong people. Alcohol and drugs, we can't get them to disappear, but we can build ourselves up to say, no, you know, I want to play football. I want to invest in my body. I want to look after myself. Self-image and self-talk, you're never going to feel good about yourself by looking at all these photoshopped images of these beautiful women. So it's about switching that off and to start looking in the mirror and to be able to say, well, what is it that I like about myself? You know, and to say positive things. If you've been talking negatively to yourself about yourself for 18 years, that's not going to go away overnight. And there's very simple ways that we can do that. And I've done this in many ways myself with an MP3 player. Record positive self-affirmations. Remind yourself of what's good about you. Remind yourself of what your skills are. Remind yourself of what you bring to a team that's positive. Remind yourself of how you've coped well in the past and to play that on repeat. The same thing, I've used it with exams to say, you know, I've worked hard. Remind yourself of the things that you do well. And because when life gets tough, we sometimes forget all of that and we can only see the negative. And again, the social media boundaries, you know, I'm not on any social media platforms. I still live, I still breathe, and I'm all the happier for it. They've become very dependency orientated. We can't cope without them. So switch them off. Don't have the phones in your room at night. You know, have a different alarm clock. You know, this fear of missing out is keeping us, our brain, and every time a ding goes, our brain has to respond to that. So it's affecting our sleep, it's affecting our moods, and it's not very good for us. It's very destructive. And so, you know, again, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of the cure. Try and make good decisions now, so that you are not that person who is going to need serious intervention down the line. That's not what the people want to happen for you. The people who care for you want to happen to you. It's important that we also be aware of stress becoming distress. You know, we talk about stress. You know, anxiety and stress is actually a very good thing in our lives. It's a protective thing, but it's when it becomes too much or too little. So too little stress leads us to becoming bored. And when we become bored, then we seek out risk-taking. And that can unfortunately lead to risk-taking such as drugs or antisocial behaviour or sexual promiscuity, okay? And so that's a challenge. And again, maybe a lack of stress, understimulated, we can lead to negative eating patterns and maybe make the wrong choices, and that just fuels it over again. On the flip side of that, too much stress isn't good either. So when we're too stressed, we can suffer a lot with headaches or stomach problems, skin problems. It raises our blood pressure, raises our risk of heart disease and stroke. It also makes us very distrustful, so leads to feelings of anger, anxiety, and fear. So some of us are naturally more stressed, and so we have to be aware of that and try to bring it down. Some of us are adrenaline junkies and we need that stress, but it's about making sure we don't tip the scales at the other side. And it's important to realize that anxiety is very natural. So we all get a feeling of fear and an experience that's maybe threatening or difficult. So that helps us to avoid dangerous situations. So if we're in a fire, that our fight or flight is raised to help us get out of there and to protect ourselves, okay? It helps us to avoid dangerous situations. It makes us run if we're maybe in the presence of somebody who is maybe going to attack us. It makes us alert and motivates us to deal with problems. So anxiety isn't all bad, but it's about trying to rein it in, that it doesn't actually paralyze us and become too much. And things that really fuel anxiety and stress, again, are the circumstances. So this year, the circumstances have fueled an awful lot for people. So our trait, we can be genetically predisposed to being very stressful. If we take drugs, LSD or ecstasy or cocaine, that leads to anxiety. And life experiences, so past bad experiences have maybe led us to be anxious. And it's important that we take this time to say, well, hang on a second, where am I at? Am I anxious? Am I afraid? And why? Okay. And to really look at that and to kind of spider diagram it out to say, well, what can I do about it? Anxiety management tools, you know, there's been an explosion of stress and anxiety over the last year. Breathing is key. One of the quickest responses to anxiety is within our respiration system, where we start taking very short and shallow breaths instead of long, deep breaths. So I have an interactive sheet that has breathing exercises on it. It's important, and the quickest way to deflate the bomb is to breathe, okay? One of the ways that you can really try and work on this is using a brown paper bag, where you practice breathing out to blow it up and breathing in to suck it back in again, to get our breathing back regulated. Another way to take us, maybe if we are experiencing anxiety, like an attack, is to sing or laugh. And it sounds stupid, but by singing or laughing, it actually forces our breathing to regulate itself. Okay, so if we are maybe struggling with anxiety, to get on a good song and sing, you know, put on something funny, you know, and put on a comedian, have a good laugh, a proper belly laugh. You know, You've Been Framed or something like that never ceases to fail, where you can actually have a really good laugh, and it forces your breathing to get regular again. The other thing is to get a good soundtrack. If our soundtrack has been the news, God love us, over the last year, you know, that's going to need a major topping up of feel good music. Get a good positive soundtrack. Make a playlist that makes you feel good. Put it on first thing in the morning, and really start the day on a positive note. Switch off the news. Give time in the morning to breathe into the day. So a lot of the time we wake up and we're on the go and we don't even take a chance to say, hang on a second here. 5 minutes, breathe into the day. You know, take the time out. I have a meditation for the morning time, and it's called, you know, I open my eyes. And it's a very nice way of easing ourselves into a day. A journal is another way at the bed at night, because what happens with anxiety is that our mind races, and then we actually get afraid that we're going to forget things. So a journal at night, write the things down that are going through your mind, and then you can rest and sleep in peace, knowing that you're not going to forget them the next day. Another thing that's very important is the effect of our diet. So minimize our coffee, chocolate post 3 o'clock that have caffeine in them, okay? And then try to take a milky drink, like, you know, like a hot chocolate or something like that pre-bed, maybe porridge, to increase our melatonin, and that will naturally allow our body to relax. Very simple things that we can do that make a massive change. And so many of us are in culture to be sitting taking a cup of coffee and a bar of chocolate at 11 o'clock at night. What that's doing to our whole body is saying, let's get ready to go. It's not saying, hang on a wee second here, this is time to chillax. This is time for us to switch off and wind down from the day. The other thing is to really challenge the thoughts. After my second child, I experienced panic attacks, and I would be a very chilled person naturally, but I was in a very specific environment at work that was very stressful. So to challenge the thoughts was to say, now you can slide on panic or anxiety. What have I got to be afraid of right now? What have I got to be worried about right now? And when you actually challenge yourself to say, right now, what is there to be afraid of? 9 times out of 10, there's nothing. So you challenge the thoughts straight away. And you might sound like you're crazy, you might feel like you're crazy, but actually it's crazy to not talk to those thoughts, and it's crazy to give in to those. And so when I was going through the panic attacks, if I was going to the town to do 3 things and I was experiencing a panic attack, I would say, I don't care, you can slide on. I've come to the town to do 3 things, and I'm not leaving this town until I've done the 3 things. And this is the conversation that you're having to yourself. But this is another, like the resources like Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway are really good books and audios that you can actually learn from to challenge those feelings of anxiety and fear. The other thing is important, especially if we're going back to sport, is to communicate effectively. You know, I went back to football at that time, and I was having panic attacks, and when we were doing tough sessions, it would come on, and the manager said to me, what's going on? And it was very hard. I wanted to bluff it. I wanted to pretend nothing was going on. But actually I said to him, look, here's the deal. I'm having massive panic attacks, and I just need to get them sorted. And he was like, what? You know, because he was shocked, he was surprised. Even when I went to my GP and said that I was having panic attacks, he says, catch yourself on, you're the most relaxed person I ever knew. And I said, no, honestly, I am experiencing these things. And the manager said to me, his natural reaction was, I'll tell the rest of the girls whatever you want. You tell me what you want me to say. And I had to say to them, You can tell them I'm having panic attacks. I just need to go away for 3 days. I don't want to make up a crappy excuse as to why I'm not at training, but I just need 3 days to try and work out what's causing them. I took the 3 days to work out what's causing them, and I never had a panic attack since. Okay, so it was specific to the time that it was in. I didn't have to worry about, oh my God, I'm going to be anxious and afraid the rest of my life. Try and deal with the anxiety as it comes, because 9 times out of 10, it's because of a situation or an experience that's happened. And then there are other natural ways that we can deflate our system. So there's a Vena sativa, passiflora, there's natural rescue remedies. These are all available at pharmacists. There's this like L-theanine, which is a supplement, and that also helps you naturally deflate the bomb, because what happens when we're anxious and we're stressed is our adrenaline is going on overdrive. It's like a little hamster on a wheel. And sometimes we just need someone to pick us up and to say, take a wee bit of time off that wheel. And that's what these natural remedies help us to do. So we don't need to worry about a GP and being on drugs for the rest of our lives. There's a lot of natural ways that we can actually challenge that fear and anxiety that's there. Coping strategies and methods of dealing with pressure on the field are specific. A lot of our confidence comes from doing, and we haven't been able to train to the same extent and in the same way. So all of us are going to struggle. We're going to realize within the first few weeks, oh my God, I'm not match fit. Oh my God, do I even know how to kick a ball? Do I know how to solo anymore? And so our confidence is going to be affected by that, okay? So this can lead to performance anxiety, and that can lead to us maybe our racing pulse and our rapid breathing. We might start stressing out, thinking, oh no, I can't this year. I'm too unfit. You know, too much time has went past. And so that can leave us very nauseous or anxious within a specific setting. Even to go to training, we can try and talk ourselves out of it. And it's important that if we have that nauseous experience, that we challenge it, okay? And we realize that our self-confidence comes from doing the training, you know, from working harder on our weaknesses to practice more. And so it's important that we're honest with ourselves to say, right, this year's very different. I haven't had the ball in my hand as much as I normally would have. School sport was gone. I've missed out a full year of school football. I've missed maybe a full year of training with the county or with my club. It was all very haphazard. So it's about being honest to say, well, I'm starting at a different point and I'm going to have to work harder. And so again, to learn that arousal, to say, yeah, I might be anxious, but the minute I get into the training, the minute I invest in it, that'll all disappear, okay? And then to be aware of maybe those triggers that are going to come, because usually we train maybe 8 weeks before we have our first league game. Last year it was maybe 2 weeks and then we were thrown straight in. So that's a more anxious and stressful environment. So it's important that we realize that. And it's important then to use the tools such as visualization, whereby when we haven't trained enough, that we can visualize ourselves doing things well, bring ourselves back to the time that we did things really well, that we were playing our best, that we were feeling our most confident, and bring that to the fore of our mind over and over again, so that we can then go back to the muscle memory and the brain memory when we're not maybe as fit as we would like to be. Other ways is to give yourself plenty of time, to not be rushed, to stretch, you know, to prepare our muscles as best as possible, to eat well. So the quickest way to try and build is to eat well and to get a good warm up on, okay? To reduce the negative thought patterns, to reduce that, oh God, I'm not fit this year. Oh God, you know, everything's coming very fast. And to try and think, well, hang on a second, everybody's in the same boat here. Everybody has had the exact same experience. And this is all going to come back. You know, everything's going to come back. Give myself 3 or 4 weeks and it's going to be good. And to focus on the task at hand rather than the outcome. It's a different environment when we're going back this year, because it's not the same as, oh, we're going out to win a championship this year, the same as we did every other year. There's a whole host of other things that we're bringing into the change room. And that could be the stresses of the last year. It could be the stresses of exams. It could be family loss, bereavement. All of those things are coming in this year. And so it's about maybe bringing that in and say, this year, I'm not going to focus just on the way that I used to be. I'm going to play like I don't care. I'm going to use football this year as my free space to get rid of maybe all of the rest of the stresses and the pressures. And automatically that will relax our body, relax our mind, and help us to really enjoy it, okay? And the other way is to generate that team spirit, to really get together and you know, have the crack with each other, you know, find out what's been going on for the last year, and equally, you know, think of, well, when the things do open, what can we do together? Not what we couldn't do for the last year, park that, leave the last year behind, but to say, well, what can we now do? Let's focus on the positive. What can we now do? And so the same thing with our football, to review our training sessions and our games and recall the things that we did well, and not in a way that we're trying to falsely build ourselves up, but in a way that we're trying to kind of take it easy and make a plan to build for the rest of this year. When we talk about coping with dealing with the pressure off the field, sleep, cannot overestimate the importance of sleep. You know, there's a reason why the Chinese use sleep deprivation as a form of torture. It is torture. Our brain doesn't deal well with it. Every system in our body is affected when we are not getting sleep. And honestly, the minor girls that I took last year after the first lockdown, they were coming with grey eyes to here, absolutely exhausted. They had moved from the fittest to the most unfit. And it's important as a coach to maybe challenge them to say, well, what's going on? You're not at yourself. And that's what I did. And some of the girls were very honest to say, look, I've got into a bad rut. I'm on the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning every night. And to say, this has to stop. And so we have to be aware that when there was nothing else to do, you know, you girls went to what you could do. Okay. And that hasn't been great, but it's again about challenging ourselves to stop that. As I say, exercise, big time, even in the few weeks now while you're waiting in the south, maybe it's going to be a bit longer. To walk, get outside every day, you know, get outside and get fresh air. We are made to be outdoors. There is nothing more healing than forestry and wooded areas. So go get up a mountain, you know, go into a forest. That's the quickest way to help you. A journal is another way, my thoughts journal, when we don't have the words to write it down. And you can burn it, you can rip it to pieces when you've got it done, but at least by writing it, you're honouring where you're at. And diet is key. You know, it's hard enough. We're living in one of the hardest times in history to eat well anyway. But equally this last year, we've all got into a bit of a rut. And so it's important that we start challenging and make small changes. Don't say, oh, well, I'm going to go vegan tomorrow, you know. But to say, well, hang on a second, first things, I'm not going to eat after 8 o'clock at night. I'm going to fast, you know, until the next morning. I'm going to try and not eat late at night. Okay. And then pull it back the next week to say, I'm going to try and cut out fizzy drinks and drink more water. But to take your time with that. As I say, look at what we're thinking, how we're feeling, and to try to say, well, is it real? And what are the ways that maybe my behavior needs to change? One of the quickest ways that we can really feel good about ourselves is to help other people. So look at that one person that we know maybe needs help, and you might spot that person within your own team the minute you go back to training, to say there's one person who's really struggled here, maybe things have been tough, we need to really help them, to breathe and to relax. And again, the research around the world has confirmed, you know, taking that time out to pray, to think about things that are bigger than you, is a really positive coping technique, and also to operate under that attitude of gratitude, to think every day, well, what can I be grateful for today? And think of those 5 things. What can you be grateful for? And there's always glimmers of hope, even in the worst of days, you know. Other ways would be, and this is, you know, have a good laugh. The monkey, I love this guy. You know, have a good laugh. You know, so many times we forget to have proper belly laughs in life. You know, we take ourselves and other people so serious. You know, we need to lighten up. Life is to enjoy, and people, good people around us, are also to enjoy. Another way of quickly managing a lot of stress and anxiety is massage, one of the most healing experiences. So maybe this is something that you could invest time in. You know, stretching, another way to release tension. The brain, you know, to be creative, to, you know, to use maybe this time to engage in art or music or writing, poetry, singing, whatever it is, to be creative. All of us have a creative side, and it's important to balance that out. And to develop really healthy self-talk. So if your normal reaction to making a mistake is, oh, I'm so dumb, I always do this is just so like me, to challenge that, to say, look, I made a mistake, I'm going to make mistakes, what have I learned from it? I'm not going to do it again. Okay, so to really challenge your self-talk. And, you know, to look at the focus on the controllable. Very simply, every day we can focus on the controllable, and it doesn't take an awful lot to do. But how good is your diet today? What would you rate yourself out of 10? You know, was it a 9 today? Was it a 2? If it was a 2, can I make it a 4 tomorrow? You know, how good is your sleep? The quantity and the quality of it. Am I sleeping well? And if I'm not sleeping well, am I taking caffeine? Am I eating a lot of chocolate? How can I try and switch off? Is my phone in my room with me? Could I try leaving it in the kitchen or somewhere different tonight? Are you physically active, you know, 5 times a week? Housework is included, so you can have your parents at the house if you want. But to get outside, and think, and have that free space. And a lot of the times we go out and we plug in the world again, and we have earphones in, and we're still connected. So how can I totally disconnect when I get outside? Do you pray? Do you have hope in something bigger than maybe this experience or yourself? Are your inner thoughts about yourself and your life positive? And if not, how can I change that? So if I'm the person that's always giving out about myself, how can I change that? And lastly, do you make time for family and friends? How do I make time for them? Am I just wasting time, or how do I do that? And so simple, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Lemon represents the better words, or the better thoughts, the better experiences of life. The sugar is the love and good people around you and positive thoughts, and together they make lemonade. And in life, you're going to have that mix. You're going to have lemons and you're going to have sugar. If we focus too much on the lemons, we become very bitter. If we focus too much on sugar, we become all happy clappy and pretend that everything's great when necessarily it's not. So together we can make lemonade, and football and that environment is the best place to make lemonade in your life. The other things that some of the questions that Claire had presented to me about motivation, it's important to empathize with the past experience, maybe use Zoom to touch base, that you can see other people, and to be motivated as a coach yourself, and to play football. When we get to the grass, look, people want to play football. You don't want to be doing skills and drills, just play football, play other games, and really endorse the fun side of things. Set goals. So one of the quickest ways to kind of set your stall out is set goals. What does each player wish for? What do they want for? What way are they going to go about it? And what is their will? Okay, what's their willpower to do it? And then just do it. Okay, be realistic. And to challenge each of the players, and to challenge yourself, say, well, what do I bring to the team? Am I a cloud? Am I always negative? Am I always saying, oh God, I don't want to be here? Am I the joker? Am I bringing a bit of crack to the team? Am I the hard worker? Am I the person that's saying, right, let's push everybody on? Am I the sunshine person? Am I the person that kind of lifts everybody else up and helps them to see the good? So really think about what you bring to the team, and to be honest with yourself in that. I've left a few other things with injury and maybe being dropped. We can maybe discuss that, maybe Claire, in the chat. If that comes up. And those are the 6 domains of resilience that we can bring together to try and bring ourselves to a more resilient place, to meet the challenges, and then actually feel really good about ourselves when we do that. Okay, so if you want to open it up, Claire, to maybe the chat.
Yeah, folks, thanks very much for that, Lynette. Loads in it. Really, really brilliant. Just want to ask anybody if they have any questions, if they want to put it into the chat or the Q&A, we can deal with them here now. I'm sure loads of people have got lots out of that. It's still buzzing around my head as well, thinking of different bits and pieces. Thought it was excellent. What about you, Kieran?
Yeah, just maybe people are thinking a few questions. I'll just throw a few observations out there, if you don't mind, or scribbling a few notes down during the presentation there. You talked about, there's a hand up. I'll just ask you a quick one, Lynette, about exam pressure, and girls feel the need to do well, maybe from early girls of the team, maybe their older siblings within the family, and like academic is not the be all and end all. What advice, or what sort of advice could you give to the girls or coaches on the team who may be thinking exams are the be all and end all, they're not getting to do their exams this year, how they're going to apply for 3rd level university and stuff like that? So what sort of strategies or coping mechanisms could you advise young girls?
It's just perspective. We have to be honest, within ourselves. If I find education easy, if I don't, and to realize that at the end of education, the point of education is to give you opportunities to open doors at the other side. So how can I best open the doors, and what doors do I need to open? When you look at education, yeah, it'd be great if you got the highest points, or you got all the stars that were possible. Doesn't matter if you don't, if you can still open the door. So a pass is still a pass, and if it allows you to go through the door that you want to go through. So it's about setting those goals as well within yourself, to say, well, where is it that I would like to go? And to set your stall to exactly where you want to go. And then to realize, well, that's where I'm aiming for, and I'm motivated to work towards that. But also, if I don't achieve that, there will be another way. So it's about setting yourself out that you're not going to say, oh, well, I just can't do this. You're going to say, I'm going to try the very best that I can try, and I'm going to work. And like everything in life, there has to be the work ethic. So if I work hard and I just do every day the best that I can do, and this is one of the things, so many people get caught up in its last minute rush for exams. My advice is check in every day that you have to check into school. You know, if it's from 9 to 3, listen, take on board. There's teachers there. They have the information that they have to pass to you. And they've been there and done that. You have two options. Either you listen to it when you have to, or you stress out later on when you realize, oh God, I should have listened. So make use of that time when it's there, to do all that you can do. Do a little bit every day. And before you know it, when it comes to actual passing through the door or getting the exam, you won't have as big a mountain to climb. And so many of the exam pressures come from poor management, by delaying and procrastination. And equally, and we do retreats, and the teenagers say themselves, they wish that someone would take this away from them, because it disturbs their concentration and their motivation. So even to have the wisdom for yourself to say to your parents, say, take that, I'm going to study. You know, because parents are in a catch-22, they don't want to take the phone away because they're aware that it's the only thing, but it's like all things, boundaries. And so if you can't concentrate with it and it's a distraction, remove it, plain and simple, you know. So it's about focusing on what you can do. And equally, you know, when we were playing the football team, there was one of our girls, and the equivalent to the leaving cert was the A levels, and she didn't get what she needed to go to college in Belfast. So she ended up going to England. She was absolutely devastated. She had never anticipated going across the water to study. She was absolutely devastated, couldn't see the wood from the trees, could only see what she'd missed out on. Look, she went to England, she met her husband out there, she's married, and she realizes now that actually not getting the points that she needed was meant to happen. She would never have met him, she would never have had those experiences. So she was able to see that there was a reason behind it. And that there was another way. There's always another way if we are creative enough to think outside the box.
Thank you.
Lynette, just I suppose we're coming back into return to play sort of in the next couple of weeks, and it's a bit anxious for a lot of players. If you could give one bit of advice for somebody coming back to go back up the training again that's maybe feeling that bit anxious, what would it be?
Don't give in to the fear. You know, you really have to talk to yourself. You know, the most nervous and anxious experiences in your life, a lot of our default is to avoid them, to say, oh God, no, I'm not going to go. And then that fuels it. Just go. It's not going to be as bad as you think. You know, you're not going to be as unfit as you think. And even if you are, you've started. You know, so we have a number of girls. We had a Zoom meeting for our minor girls, and we've challenged them to do a home session. We've challenged them to do a track session. And they're panicking because, you know, they're unfit. We're all unfit. You know, we're all not where we want to be. But depending on how much we want to invest in the next few weeks, fitness is amazing. We have muscle memory. Within 3 to 6 weeks, you will be amazed at how quick everything will come back. You know, but you know, there's not a year that I ever went back to intercounty, and that first week you're thinking, did I ever play football? You know, I don't know how to even kick the ball. And so it's like anything, when we don't do something for a while, we doubt ourselves. But that confidence and that esteem comes back from doing it, you know, and that's just the quickest way. So don't give in to the fear. Just get out there. It's been a long enough, lonely enough year. Get out there and to meet other people, and you'll get such a buzz just by meeting real human beings face to face again.
There's a question that's come in here. Can a coach influence a 14-year-old into making good choices, i.e. less phone time, more sleep? Or are they still too young at that age to take it on board? I noticed a big change in attitude from the step into secondary school. Massive social change in the last few years make it a big challenge for a parent to deal with, never mind a coach.
Yeah, look, in life, boundaries, you know, we know from all of the psychology that we all deal well with healthy boundaries. And we also know that at present with this and with gaming and with, you know, your computer games and all the rest, the boundaries have went out the window. And that's very difficult, because if you're at home and your parents aren't good with boundaries, you're kind of just winging it yourself. And it's very hard as a 14-year-old to know your own boundaries, to know what is good for you and what's not. Okay, so that's a difficult thing. In terms of a coach, without a doubt, you can have such a positive influence. You know, some of the coaches that I met, and that had the biggest impact on me, actually really challenged me. You know, they told me things that I didn't want to hear. They told me things that needed to change that I really didn't want to change. But equally, that don't lose sight that in that coaching role that you have an opportunity to do that. And I've done that myself. And you'd be surprised, we can be afraid as coaches that it'll not be received well or that somebody will be offended. I think deep down, if girls know that you're coming from a really good place, they will receive it well, you know, because I've had the conversation last year, as I said, with one of our players, and I said, like, you're not at yourself, what's going on, you know? And she said, and I said, look, you got to rein that in, that's not good for you, sleep is so important. You know, you've went from being flying at the start of the season, and now you can hardly get through a training session. That's how much of an impact this is having you. And sometimes other people outside of ourselves can see things before we can. And so it's important, if we do see things, that we have the courage to just say them, and to be prepared for somebody saying, shut up, or F you, I'm not listening to you. But at least they will know that you've noticed something, because they probably deep down know that maybe they're out of control with their phone, or maybe that they're not sleeping well, or maybe that their diet isn't good.
I think as well, probably a big aspect that is maybe knowing your players, Lynette. You would probably agree in that, who you can maybe broach that conversation with and who you can't. You know.
Yeah, that's it. And equally, you know, I suppose I'm really motivated to take minors, because at minors, that was my toughest years in life. Those are when I was getting very badly bullied, where I felt totally lost. And those are the years that really I was crying out for somebody to notice, for somebody to notice that I wasn't well. But I was able to put on a very good mask and turn it on when football came, because football was my escapism. But equally, I was a lot quieter than I would have been. And I would have been maybe a lot more emotional or verbal, you know, on the field to referees and things like that. And it was all a way of venting. And I, deep down, would have loved somebody to say, is everything all right with you? You know, you're not yourself. And so that's why I suppose I have the courage to say that, because I know, and a lot of young girls would be the same, they would love somebody to notice. And there's nothing worse in life than you're really struggling and you feel that you're not coping well with things, or that you're anxious or stressed, and people don't notice, because it makes you feel far more alone. And I've also had the experience within my own team setting where one player was very, very depressed with big change. And I knew that things maybe were going on at home that weren't great. And I asked her, was she okay? And I got the 2-finger salute. I was told to F away off, mind my own business, keep my nose out of things. 2 years later, that same player thanked me, because she knew that somebody else spotted something wasn't right, you know, and so it allowed her to acknowledge that things were tough. And so the same thing with grief, you know, that we, you know, whatever life throws at you, if it's anxiety, if it's an eating disorder, we're there 3 times a week. And we've had so many conversations within our own team with maybe somebody eating or not eating and saying, you're taking it too far. Your eating behaviours are not right. And it takes sometimes someone to say that before they actually acknowledge a problem, before it gets too far. You know, so my call would be to be courageous enough, and also be prepared to be told where to go. You know, that's the worst thing that'll happen.
Go either way for you. Lynette, we're going to go for this evening, because we've been on there about an hour and a half. It's brilliant, and as somebody said, we could talk for 3 hours. We could listen to it like that all night, and I think myself and Karen both feel like that as well. We could talk to you all night, because you're only ever scratching the surface. So just want to really thank you for your time and the effort you put into the presentation, and again sharing so much knowledge, so much personal experience to the presentation tonight, and hopefully it gives everybody food for thought. So a big thanks from me and Kieran.
No problem. And as I say, the slides are available to everyone, and if anybody wants to make contact with me directly, maybe with any query that they have at any time, they can pop me an email at any stage, and I'll try my best to get back to anybody who has any concerns.
No problem. So good evening, everybody. Have a great night. Look after yourselves. Do a bit of journaling, do a bit of reflection after hearing everything this evening, and have a safe return to play whenever that comes in the coming weeks. And thank you again very much, Lynette, and I'm sure we'll see you in the future doing some other work for us. Thanks very much.
No problem. All the best. God bless.